Welcome back, everyone, to Data Science for Everyone. Today, we're going to be continuing our discussion on JavaScript functions. So let's get started. So today, we're going to be focusing on higher order functions. Now, higher order function is a function that takes another function as an argument, and that outputs another function as its return value. You've already seen two higher order functions recently, and that is the timeout and the set timeout and the set interval. Now, both of these take a callback function to execute later as an argument. JavaScript has a ton of built-in functions that are higher order as well. So we'll talk about some of those today. So next thing we're going to be talking about is the array methods that take callbacks. So you can take an array method. So let food list here. And we'll take in, maybe, let's talk about takeout order, okay? And you want, let's say, a hamburger, you want a milkshake, fries, pizza, and tacos. Okay. Then you can use the find method. So let's do takeout order dot find. And let's actually talk a little bit about this. So the find array method finds the first element in an array that matches some criteria that you set. So, and you'll set this with a callback function that returns a Boolean either true or false. So again, let's maybe say we want to find the first item in our shopping list that has, let's say, more than 6 characters. Okay, so we can say item, and we create up an arrow function, and then we do item dot length is greater than 6. Okay, and remember, it does this for the first item that it finds. Okay, so here that is going to be hamburger. So we could say that something that is maybe less than 6 would be fries. Okay, and again, it comes up to our first instance. Pizza and tacos also fill that criteria. So callback functions, we pass to find is the item arrow item.length is less than 6. Now this callback takes advantage of two useful syntactic features of arrow functions. First, because our function only has one parameter, item, in here, we can leave off the parentheses and around the parameter list. The second thing is because our function body involves only one statement, this item.length is less than 6, then we can be more to use a more concise body syntax, leaving off the return keyword and the braces around the body. So this allows us to define the logic for finding an element in a very clean manner. Again, this is why arrow functions are ideal for callbacks. So this find method, again, is going to return a callback for each element in the array. The callback takes in the element and returns true or false based on whether each element has the 6 characters. If the callback returns true, then for the given element, the find method returns an element and halts the search. In this case, again, it is going to return fries rather than pizza or tacos. If no item is found to meet the criteria, then the find method would return undefined. So in this instance, let's say is exactly equal to 6, we get undefined. Now, another thing that we can use, another method, is the filter method. So the takeout order dot filter. Now this filter method returns a new array containing all the elements from the original array that satisfy the criteria. So as for the find method, the criterion is specifically using a callback. Now to illustrate this, let's actually take a look at our original idea that we had. So now let's do item is less than arrow here. Item.length is less than 6. Oh, length. Length is less than 6. So notice here we get fries, pizza, tacos. Now again, if we said those that are greater than 6, we get hamburger and milkshake. This filters out the array elements whose character lengths are either too short or too long, while leaving, and again in this instance, either fries, pizza, or tacos, or hamburger and milkshake. Now, another thing that we can do is transform each element of an array. Now, sometimes you'll want to transform each element of an array and store the results into a new array. So for instance, you may want to take some numbers and you need to perform some operation on them. You could use the for of loop, as we discussed before, but a more concise technique is the map array method. Now this applies the same callback to each element of the array and returns a new array. So let's go back to the example that we had before. We had some numbers in here, and we'll say something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And and I think before we used cubes, we did cubic. So in this time, let's do let squares is equal to numbers dot map here, and it would be x. And you can say x by x. Okay, and now we can take a look at squares here, and we see it's 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36. All right, great. So this map method applies this callback. So now this is the callback here to each of the elements in the numbers array, returning a new array for these first 6 numbers here. Okay, and again, the first 6 squares, while leaving the original array unchanged. So again, if we look at numbers has not changed whatsoever. Now, compare how concise syntax is passing map to an arrow function if we utilize the for loop. Well, if we did that, we'd have to do something like let squares is equal to some empty array here, and we're still going to be using the numbers function here. And you can use the for let x of numbers, and then here we can say something like squares dot push x by x. Okay, and again here we can now look at squares and we get the same result. So notice this line here is significantly less verbose than this other example. Now they both work, okay? I'm not going to tell you whether one is better or worse than the other, but this map method is very useful, okay? And it's very concise for what we would likely want it to do. Now, another thing that we can utilize with this map method is to also if we have an array of similar objects and you want to extract the same piece of information for each one. So for example, we have an array of objects that represents items in a store. Okay, and this is a very common example that you would have. So let's say let grocery stock list. Okay, well, oops. And let's go on and create up a nice list here. So first off, the name of the item would be, so let's say maybe processors. Okay. And then you would have a price of maybe, let's say $200. Okay. Then let's say that you would have a name of monitors. Okay. Price of $400. Then you'd have name of, let's say, keyboards. Okay, with a price of maybe $150. All right, so now we have a nice grocery stock list, or maybe not actually a grocery stock list, but let's say supply stock list. Maybe you're working for a dealer that sells processors, monitors, and keyboards. Now let's say that you want to grab all of the prices from your stock. Okay, so let prices is equal to our supply stock list dot map here, and we want to grab an item, and we want each item dot price in this instance. Okay, prices now looks like a list of 200, 400, and 150. All right, so now we are able to extract out the information from an array. Now, this is going to be very useful to us later on in our video series when we start wanting to access maybe some data for visualizations, when we use D3 or when we use some other processes, maybe even charts.js, etc., to be able to grab a hold of a specific data piece that we want to map out. So this callback here is utilizing the item arrow item.price, which takes the item and returns the value of the item's price property. Now the map function is going to apply this callback to each object in the original array in turn. And this creates a new array with all of the prices. Now, in general, it is preferable to use the map function rather than the equivalent loop whenever possible. Okay, so please keep this in mind. Now, both the map method's conciseness and for the code's self-documenting nature, it's going to be very, very useful. Now, a loop would be more appropriate when your needs are more custom. So, for example, if each number in the elements in the array doesn't match to the number in the original array. So again, when you have more complex things that you need to take care of, that may be a more important thing to do. Now, the next thing this falls into is custom functions that take callbacks. So maybe we want to create up our own high order function that takes a callback argument. Now, simply include the name for the callback in the function's list of parameters, just as you'd name any other parameter. Then you can do, then when you want to call that callback within the function body, add parentheses after the parameter name, just like calling any other function. So let's illustrate this by creating up a new function here, and we'll say a function called do it again. Okay, and it'll take some callback. And again, you don't have to call this callback again. You can just call it whatever you'd like. But it's nice to call it callback. So here you would say callback. It'll do something twice. Okay, so now we can say do it again. And we can put in a nice arrow function in here. And so we'll say console log the bees. Okay. Oh, and I'm missing. There. The bees. Notice, we didn't actually do anything to this. We just created up some callback, do it again. We have some callback, so it's wanting a function, and the reason that it knows that it's a function is we put in the parentheses at the end of that argument at the end. Now, if we try to do this with, let's do do it again, and just put in hello, for example, we're going to get an error here. Uncaught type error. Callback is not a function. So again, it will tell us if we try and pass in something that isn't what it needs. So here again, we're passing in some string and we're going to get that type error. Now the callback we passed doesn't necessarily require any arguments though, but we can also set up a higher order function so its callback takes arguments. So for example, we can create up a function that calls another function some number of times, passing the current number of times into that callback. So let's actually redo our do it again. Okay. So do it again, it's going to take a callback, and let's say times. Okay, so we want to actually have this repeat so many times. So we can say for let I equal to 0, I is less than times I plus plus, and this is a semicolon instead. And then we will have it do the call back I. And whoops. And we'll close that. All right, so now we have this function that will do some sort of callback X number of times. So let's take a look and see what happens here. So let's do it again, and let's say something like we want this to do something 3 times, or let's maybe make it do it 5 times. We'll do time console log, and we'll say this was time here, and we'll do something like time backticks. Let's close the brackets. Oh, and console lot is not, so it's console log. Again, got butterfingers here today. All right, so notice here we say this time was 0, this time was 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? You're repeating that 5 times. Now, again, we could try that one more time with maybe do it again of 3, and again, this time 0, this time 1, this time 2. Okay, so that here we were passing an arrow function as a callback, and it has a single time parameter. This function incorporates time into a message that gets logged into the console. So each time this callback is executed, time takes on the current value of the looping variable I and inserting it into the number of 0, 1, 2, or up to whatever number. So probably the last thing we're going to talk about today is functions that return functions. Okay, so far we focused on high order functions that take in functions as arguments, but higher order function can also output a function as its return value. For example, you say you want to create up various functions that add a suffix to the end of a string, okay? So maybe you want to add in like some exclamation points, or some, maybe like add in confusion or something like that in there. Or maybe you just want to put in a bunch of hashtags, okay? Oh, you can do that as well. So, or maybe even just like a bunch of percent signs to the end. So let's go on and do this. But rather than manually defining a separate function to add each possible suffix, okay, to make a function with text and a suffix parameters and having to supply that suffix every time we call it, we can actually define a higher order function that takes in a suffix and returns a function that will append that suffix to a string. So let's create a function called add, let's say add suffix, or let's say add strings. Because it doesn't necessarily, add suffix. Okay. And you know what? I think that's boring. So let's do something like something that's actually useful in business. So let's say let's call this function add title. Okay, so maybe it'd be something like Dr., Mr., Mrs., etc. So let's call it title. Okay. And here we'll add in here the return, okay, of another function of text. And here inside this function, you will return text, the prefix or the title, plus text. And actually here, let's change text to name, because that's what it would actually be. Name. Okay. And let's close this off. Okay, so we created up an add title function. So now let's say let greeting doctor. Okay, so greeting doc. Yeah, doctor is fine. And so we'll say add title, and it'll be doctor. Okay, so now we have this function called greeting doctor. And let me actually just do this real quick so you can see. I hit enter. Notice it's actually returning out a function here that'll take in a title plus some name. Okay, so let's go greeting doctor, and we'll give the name of bar. Okay, so notice here now it says greetings Dr. Bar, or well, it says just Dr. Bar here at least instead of greeting here. So this is nice because now we're able to call that inner function that we first have to get access to by calling the outer function. So again, let's go over this section here just one more time, okay? So there are two return keys happening here, keywords here. The first one is used by the higher order add title function to return an anonymous function here. This function here is an anonymous function. And then the second return key right here is going to inside of the anonymous function itself. And when that function is called, this from the anonymous function that we're doing here, all right, this function's text parameter is going to be concatenated with the add title text, that title parameter that we had here. And to be able to call this inner function, what do? Well, we create the add title here, and we add the doctor title that we wanted into the greeting doctor, and then we're going to use and add this text in here for bar to create Dr. Bar. So again, you can do this in a lot of fantastic ways to be able to create up fantastic examples. So again, we could go and change this. Let's do title Mr. Okay, and it'd be Mr. space here. And then we can say let Mr. bar is going to equal to, well, we don't actually have to do that. We can do title Mr. here, and we can put in bar. To call that, and notice now it says Mr. Bar. So again, we can return this is going to always add in whatever our prefix that we want here to add. So, and again, it's going to be fantastic. So we've discussed scope previously, okay, just a little bit. Now, for example, how variables are defined in a while loop or a for loop, and how we can also access, how they can't be accessed outside the loop. Now, similar variables, by definition, inside of functions do have scope only within that function. So typically, they're going to disappear once that function ends. Scope gets more interesting, though, when we have these nested functions like we've had before. However, as an example that we have at hand here, we might accept the scope of the outer function that we had to maybe disappear after we call it. But the inner function retains the access to those variables and the arguments of that scope. Now, this again can be very interesting for how we utilize these functions in the future. Now, functions that hold on to variables and parameters from their closing scopes are known as closures because they close over the environments. Now, in these last couple videos, we've talked about how to make our code more readable with functions and make them more concise by creating and working with our own custom functions. Now, we saw three main styles of doing functions. We've talked about function declarations, function expressions, and arrow functions, and we've experimented with block body and concise body syntaxes. Now, I hope you guys have learned how to provide input into these functions by passing in values and the parameters as arguments. Now, you've also learned how to take advantage of the function's work, either through the return value or its side effects, or both. Now, you've also seen how functions can be assigned to values and variables, and how they can be passed to and returned from higher order functions. So if you guys like this content and you want more of it, please comment, subscribe, and hit that like button. I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.